Good. Wow.
How'd you get here?
I don't even know what the fuck is going on. I don't even know what's going on. It's incest coding so that you won't admire the character, she said so explicitly in a live stream. Are you kidding me? The arsonist character, I don't care about. If I have to watch 10 videos in order to get the point of why she's got a third of this video written the way she does with nothing else, I can't. I don't give a fuck. I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. I'll pass on learning about the Philosophy Tube Extended Universe. Fucking. The idea of foreverism, the critique that Grafton Tanner lays, is that we want to believe in permanence, nostalgia in the past so much that we do a great deal of things around that. One of the things that we do is we build extended universes. And I was at Lucasfilm. I worked at Lucasfilm and LucasArts for a long time. And I got to kind of watch as this shift happened. And it was kind of an amazing thing. There was always an extended universe to Star Wars, but it was fan-made. It was a very unique way that it came about. I have a Wikipedia page. That's how fucking long I was at Lucasfilm. Yes, Wikipedia is a thing. Not a joke. That's not a joke. That's not a joke. The way that fans and things made is there was what was called canon. The canon was the films. That was it. And even not all the films. The way that these things sort of came out is George and other people who wrote them, because George didn't write the movies. He didn't really know the story of all of them beforehand, whatever anyone wants to say. They were written ad hoc. The first movie was written and it was an accident that it was a success. They wanted more. So he hired a woman to write them, claimed it for himself, fired her, rewrote some minor things, and went about his time. Now, what was in there was ad hoc shit. When they decided to do Empire, he explicitly realized, because he had all of the toy rights, that he wanted to make more toys. So he created the Bounty Hunters. Specifically, that scene is specifically that. Otherwise, you wouldn't have had scenes like that. So the awareness of making things for toy makers, making things for his own pockets, and building the movies in a certain way was done. Now, at this point, what is the story of Star Wars? Well, it's just the movies. There's no extended universe. It's just the things that happened in the films. And they're enjoyable. Don't get me wrong. I think the first Star Wars is a phenomenal children's film. And they're all children's films. But what happened at some point is those kids got older. It's a weird thing that happens. And immediately as those kids got home after Return of the Jedi, the world realized that they could make more Star Wars. And so they started making animated series. They started making books. They started making anything they could, comics, baseball cards, whatever it was. But there's not enough stuff in the films. There's just not. Films don't have a lot of things in it. It's really horrifying. So they started making up stuff. They started going through and naming all the guys in the fucking cantina background. And all of the guys in Jabba's palace suddenly had names that they didn't before. They didn't have names at all. No one, they were fucking elephant guy. It wasn't Max Rebo. It was fucking insane. So over time, those toys and those books and everything made around it wasn't really canon because it was off of it. But they had to fit somehow. And what happened is people bought these collectible things, not realizing that they weren't actually connected to the film in any meaningful way. But people buy this stuff, and people didn't know that they weren't connected. And so what you did when you got the stuff home is you made sense of the character. You made those stories. You made them. Literally, if I've got, if you can't see, I have my original Snoodles. Did you know that's called Snoodles? That's Snoodles. That's fucking Snoodles. The sexy singer Snoodles. Yeah. So what's Snoodles' backstory? Well, when I was a kid, I had an entire story. And I had a Max Rebo, I had all the guys, and all the shit, and telling the stories. Everyone told stories. We made sense of the characters, and then books came. We made sense of them. We integrated them into a larger thing. Because what we wanted was that stability. It's a weird shift in how storytelling changed. For a long time, movies and books and stories were just that story. Like that was it. They did, even stories that were sort of ongoing, they were part of a very specific whole, but there wasn't like an extended universe. If I read Proust's In Search of Lost Time, if I read Swan's Way, that's a book. If I read all of In Search of Lost Time, it's magnificent. But at no point would I say it's like the extended universe of Swan's Way. It's the entire story because the author's building it. It's all that. Well, at some point, and this happened in like the 90s, there started to be a switch in what licensing meant. This is actually really fascinating history of licensing because in the 80s, you have to remember, toys were built by the companies that made the cartoons. So Lucasfilm had all the rights to toys with Hasbro and kind of managed that. Transformers was made by the company who made the Transformers. G.I. Joe was made by the company. Like they produced toys to go with shows. They were a marketing and production vehicle for capital. As I like to say, the best investment cost per ounce of oil is toys. It's the best way per ounce of oil to get it sold. So that was the way it's set up. But in the 90s, they started seeing that people wanted more outside things. They wanted to build and see, I want to see C-3PO in this environment. I want to see this character in this other world. And crossovers sort of started to happen. But it was an eventual thing that was done in universe. It wasn't a license per se. These started to happen, but again, they weren't thought of in the same way. There are amazing examples of Saturday morning cartoon crossovers that would not have happened today. It's not like it's a lot like Spider-Man for the longest time wasn't part of the Marvel universe. That's how most of intellectual property worked till the 2000s. See, in the 2000s, when George went back to the bucket, they started having a second thing. Lucasfilm is generally at the front of this. They started having a second thing happen. Everyone was giving them money to do anything. And you're talking about silly sums of cash to have R2-D2 and C-3PO sell a car, or in Europe sell TVs. It's one of my favorite ads. Like, it's this entire thing that suddenly they knew they could sell because now it wasn't just kids. Because Lucasfilm realized what had happened is kids, people who were 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 with the first films, which means they were born in 1972-ish, they were now 30 with an 8-year-old of their own. And if you can get those kids as kids, that's great. But we need to get the adults too. So we started licensing. They started licensing and building out stuff for adults because they could do adults and kids. And their goal was to build what they called the treadmill. This is the word they used. Because in a treadmill, you feel like you're moving forward, but you're not. And if you can get kids early on into Star Wars, they will always be into it. And they will get their kids into it. And they will get their kids and their kids. This was their theory kind of for the eternity of Star Wars. So intellectual property started growing and changing. And one of those things that it did, it happened at a time when the internet started to grow. So you got things like the 501st. I have a bunch of friends in the 501st. I've done a bunch of charity stuff with them. Really, really, really amazing people. They are people who dress up as generally, I know there's a few Jedi and others, but generally stormtroopers of various types and bounty hunters. And they go around and we would hire them for events, even because they have really good outfits, better than we would be able to hire otherwise. So they'd pretend to be security, or they'd walk around E3 or GDC. We hired them for PAX a few years. It was really fun. They're really great guys. And the way that they worked is they actually had names in universe and all this setup. It was awesome. But those guys were like that old school thing. What started to happen was as people sort of noticed that they didn't have to dedicate all their time to being 501st. 501st people were always 501st people. That was their thing. and my buddy Spike, who I've known for a very long time, 501st is his thing. He did not do any other cosplaying. 501st was everything. If you've never seen the 501st, it's fucking crazy. And it's worthwhile as a thing to sort of know that this exists. I'm always stunned by this shit. This is the 501st Legion website. This is a real fucking thing. They have their own booths everywhere. The number of people and what they do is incredible. And they're really generally pretty cool, to be very frank. That's not AI. These are people with their real outfits that they've made, sourced. It's incredible. There are thousands of them. They do a lot of Make-A-Wish shit, a lot of kids stuff, a lot of show-ups on things. It's really, really fun. I think that's actually at E3. I think that one's actually, I know that one. I think that's E3. But the 501st is everywhere. But they're generally guys who only do this. You kids don't know of a time where this was the case, because now people make their way out of that and they do lots and lots of cosplaying. And they switch between one IP and another and another and another. And also IPs began to mingle. And suddenly that thing that was there, which was the steady Star Wars, everyone knew growing up, and you had a setup. Here's where the movies and these are the books. Suddenly it grew into a diaspora. This coincided with one of the more horrific moments when the 501st is around and will be forever. They're not going anywhere. Good people, go say hi to them. If you're into Star Wars, join. They're pretty cool. They literally have like classes on how to build the costumes. Like it's fascinating. But the way that the thing happened then is it shifted. They'd spend years dedicated to this one thing. But as the diaspora happened, as IP began to sort of shift, you didn't have that steady thing from the filmmaker. Suddenly there was more content than you could ever know. There were more books than you could ever know. There was more video games. Like, how many Star Wars video games existed prior to 2008? Fucking 40, 45, 50 plus. I mean, if you talk about, additional content or appearances, or you talk about comic books, like the story universe wasn't unified. It wasn't. All these things were done kind of ad hoc when they could be found and people did them. So the real fascinating sort of shift happened when George decided to take back control of his intellectual property. And it was a big moment internal to Lucasfilm and with the really hardcore fan community. And it had to do with the Mandalorians. And it was a weird moment at Lucasfilm. And I think for IP, I consider this, and it was just because I happened to be there, I think, but I consider this like a seminal moment, like one of those, the fulcrum of tilting, all that shit. For years, the Mandalorians were in the films only kind of known by Boba Fett and like Jango Fett. I was like, at best. But there's a couple authors, one specifically, who had written insane backstories on the Mandalorians. Like, there are books about them that are like developing languages and culture, and people had gotten deeply invested in these books. Again, this is what extended universe used to mean. It was all of these things, and people would memorize it, learn it. They'd learn to speak the Mandalorian shit. It was wild. And then George, because he wanted to bring Boba Fett back in the Clone Wars TV series, and he wanted to bring Boba Fett back, killed all of it. Like, he didn't care about any of it. He retconned it, and it was this huge fucking travesty. People were really upset. That switch and that change to this is what the author wants isn't really that. This is what people talk about. They're like, look, the author, George created it and he wants that. George didn't really create fucking Star Wars. Go read the history on who wrote it and who came up with characters and all that shit. It's a little different than that. George was the owner of it. He was the capitalist behind Star Wars, but the vast majority of stuff you love, he didn't actually do. And also, if he had been able to have the final edit of the film, no one would ever have cared about Star Wars. Think of Elon Musk and how he made Tesla and SpaceX. It's the same kind of shit. So what it is the capital owner of Star Wars switched it from this, which is people who were emergently building and growing and doing all this stuff. That changed to being top down because the owner says this. And what is canon one, this was a sea change. And this happened in 2008, 2009. This was like a big fucking change. And it's a completely, I don't think Elon Musk founded Tesla. Just to say, Elon Musk did not found Tesla. It was a couple other guys who he ran out and then actually made them sign paperwork that he was a founder despite only ever having put money in years after. He's a bullshit artist. He's a liar. And so Elon Musk is a liar who's never engineered or built anything. And what he did with Path of Exile has been his entire career. But that's most of these people. Thank God for George Lucas's ex-wife is right. Because I still stand by, I believe A New Hope is like basically a perfect version of itself. But that change is a big deal. Because when we had before, it was audience demands, market demands fueled books that were made. People who wanted to make them offered that. Publishers, Random House would go, okay, this works too, this works too, this works too, and runs with that. So they would do they would do books on Han. Lots of early stuff was like Han romance shit. As they would get going, they'd have more diversified, kind of a lot of weird side stories. They just stuff with, one of my favorites I learned about is the Force Witches and the sentient Rancors who were force wielding, which is, by the way, fucking cool concept. But again, someone spent years doing nothing but building out the Mandalorians because that's what her books were about. It's what she cared about. She really enjoyed doing it. The capital owners, not the creators of any of this, the owners of this, got rid of that and changed it to what capital demands top down. This is a very different way of creating. It's unique to the time we're in. It's something that exists maybe specially only in the time we're in. We like to think that, oh, well, we're democratized. We have the ability to have all this content and we have so much in front of us. But you have to remember what is getting made is what has been allowed to be made. And allowed to be made is what is decided by a very, very small group of shitheads. It's no longer we don't really care about what books get made because it's not really our core business. George, for years, just kind of ran Lucasfilm like a licensing thing. He was more focused on ILM and he was working towards second films. And all the licensing was, it was Rothman's and a few others things. It's not. But then it switched and now they have committees at the top because the business people came in, knew what they could get. Disney has all of it. And they go, this is what we think the market will allow. Doesn't matter what people want to make. They don't give a fuck. It's top down, top down, top down. And it's the kind of thing that eliminates the meaning created by the fans, the emergent fans. So you end up in a really weird place where now, when we hear about Star Wars or we hear about story worlds or extended universes, we get invested because we have to. Marvel is maybe the only company who will ever be able to do what they did, but the way that it works, it's lame how people refuse to read Legends. I'm going to get to it because that's exactly where I'm going. Marvel made it so that the only way you could understand or enjoy the final film in full, and I mean this, is having seen and read and understood every single fucking thing that's in it. There are references that I didn't watch all the movies. I don't know half the fucking people in that final scene. If you never saw Guardians of the Galaxy, you'd be just confused. If you never saw the Marvel's films, you can't really watch Guardians of the Galaxy 3 in order with the others. It necessitates that not only do you consume all of that stuff, but that you only consume the right stuff. That's the big deal. It's no longer, hey, some guy made a really good comic, I'm going to read that. It's no, is this part of canon? Is this canon? Is this canon? That's the whole deal. And so all that matters is proper consumption in the proper order, in the proper way for us to get to that point. And so consumption of extended universe, developing out that extended universe, knowing what will be around and having the ability and desire to go after those things. This is foreverism because I can't handle being invested in a character who will die and go away. Because if I do get invested and they die and go away, it will be wasted. They will have to come back. There's a great version of this because it's gone amok ever since George did this, and it changed the face of entertainment. I mean this. It changed the face of entertainment. before that, people did kill characters. It was like, it's not just George R. R. Martin and everyone's like, Game of Thrones, I can't believe they're fucking killing. It's like, we used to do that shit all the time. They used to have, what the fuck are you talking about? But if you haven't seen, God damn it, I'm just not able to, Kingsman, thank you. The Kingsman is like the best example of how fucking insane this has gotten, because it's a very particular moment in the film. Sorry, spoilers. But the reason the Kingsman is great is because they fucking kill not only a major actor, but a main character right as you don't think he's going to. And they do it in a way where you watch the bullet go through his goddamn head and you watch him hit the ground. Like you see death. He's dead.
It's like those old movies we both love. Now I'm going to tell you my whole plan, and then I'm going to come up with some absurd and convoluted way to kill you, and you'll find an equally convoluted way to escape.
Sounds good to me.
Well, this ain't that kind of movie.
There's no coming back from it. And then the next movie, they brought him back.
Things up.
Fuck me.
And they made sure he was healed and safe with like magic bandages. It was a weird moment, but why did they bring him back? If you go back and you watch interviews, it's my favorite thing because the director was like, hey, everyone's asking, is that actor coming back? We're going to find a way.
And do it in a way that the audience can accept. And so far they have been. Although it's been very sweet, a lot of people have said, we don't care how you bring him back, he's back, and that's all that matters. But I had to do, I really, you know, when we wrote it, we were just very much...
It's like, wait, what? No one was asking. No, there's nobody. Nobody was like, hey, is that actor coming back? The one who we watched get shot through the head. They made up their own hype and then sniffed it and then believed it. They huffed their own shit. And so they brought him back in the next movie, and it's insane. The whole movie's shit, but it's that same mentality of like, what the fuck? So here we are in a world where we have overall all of this absolute garbage that's being shoveled out in every single direction, top down, things no one wants. Did anyone here want the fucking game from Massive's a phenomenal studio out of Ubisoft? No one wanted that fucking scavenger smuggler fucking bullshit game that they put out for Star Wars. No one wanted that. No one wanted that. No one wanted that. People want good games, but those people don't get the money to develop that because they're not necessarily commercially viable, because they're not necessarily supported, because they're not necessarily in line with what the people at Disney want. And you have to go through all of that. I ran licensing for Avatar. So you want to talk about difficult people. I worked for John Landau, rest in peace, and James Cameron directly with Kathy Franklin, who was my direct boss. And we were in charge of the entire Avatar franchise, which is not a small franchise. And we had very particular tastes. One of the reasons I was hired was because Jim and John wanted someone who would make sure that you wouldn't have terrible overdone games. The first Ubisoft game they were really unhappy with. They didn't want that second thing to happen. I had won a bunch of games awards and they were like, hey, we love your ideas. Come on in. So for 4 years, I spent time trying to earn enough political capital to get the Avatar game made that I wanted. And we got some of the way. The Avatar game that came out from Massive Studios, that was my project that I started, I kicked off, I got everything signed, but it's not what we originally signed or what we set up for or what I really wanted, because the challenge was, it wasn't what Jim wanted. As much as Jim is James Cameron, is that guy. He's that fucking guy. He is fucking James Cameron, and he is that in real life. John Landau's bigger than the world, and these people are incredible, and they have more political capital than you'd think than anyone. But even they can't go against the money that is needed for them to keep functioning, to make the movies they want, to be part of that machine. And necessarily, it comes down to who can give the most money, who can support a game, who can put the most money in for a license, and you just can't give a license away. You just can't give a license away. We had phenomenal game pitches from some amazing studios that I genuinely love, like genuinely love. I wish I could say their names, like studios that you would go, oh my God, and people and and thoughts, and it was incredible. But in the end, you can't, because the money isn't there. And if you're not making money, you don't get to keep your job, even if you work for Jim. That's it. You can't help it. And it's a lot of work. And these games are incredibly expensive. And so you end up in this problem, because once upon a time, Lucasfilm Games was Tim Schafer and a handful of assholes in a warehouse who just were 3 people making Zack McCracken or Monkey Island, and they could get away with putting out an entire game with 2 or 3 people. But you can't do that anymore, because people need live services. They need multiplayer, and they need the infrastructure that supports that. And what people don't get is that the infrastructure to support those things, to be able to play with your friends, costs every company who's putting it together per user dollars a month, which is insane to consider. So you need to make that much money per user to justify overtime in the P&L, and you're fucked. Like this, sorry, it's just turned into a fucking rant, but we end up in a position now, and it's why I think the economy is in the position it's in, and I'm seeing it in everything. I have friends in film and TV. Nothing's being funded because they don't need to, because friends in the office are pulling enough subscriptions and keeping people on their services that they don't need new shows. They're blowing money on hit or miss stupid shit that's out the corner, reality shows, other things, but they don't need it. So there's no money going into these things anymore, not like there was. Video games, it's gigantic hits or misses. Ubisoft needs to land this next one or they're in fucking trouble. This new Assassin's Creed, which I hear is possibly good, I don't know. But even Marvel Rivals, which lands and has 200,000 concurrents on Steam, and then like a month later drops to like 15,000 concurrents, and then down below that and down below that. You just can't keep it up. Grafton Tanner takes all of this and he pulls it together and he starts talking about, hey, what is it about us that demands that things stick around forever? That they have this permanence, this attachment, because part of that drive with why we need to have all of the different things that come out, why we have to have all of the extended universes, why we have to do all those things. Why is it that we are attracted to it? And it's the stability of knowing that the time we've spent and valued won't go to waste, because we consider loss a waste. Foreverism's worth reading. I highly, highly recommend it. I highly, highly recommend it.